it's Arlesha. I'm a purpose-driven mover and shaker, harmonizing life and ambition. Welcome to my podcast. This season, I'm talking about the special stories, lessons, and insights from my 14-plus year run in the sports industry. Throughout each episode, you'll hear about the gems that drive my career approach and my outlook on life, in the hopes it'll inspire you to harmonize your life and career ambitions. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Hey, it's Arlesha podcast. These past few months, I've received a collection of questions from listeners and those that I've interacted with in sharing insights on my career and the sports industry at large. So this episode is going to be a career Q&A, answering a few questions on the pivots I've made so far in my career and more. But before I get into some of your questions, I want to remind listeners and those who are listening to this podcast for the first time to subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen. Subscribe and follow. This way you don't miss out on notifications on upcoming episodes. This season, I have been sharing some exclusive behind-the-scenes stories, moments, and insights as I take a look back at my near 15-year run in the sports and entertainment industry. I am approaching 15 years. How did we get here? I've been sharing the gems learned from my time working at elite companies and champion-winning athletes. Subscribe so you don't miss out. There is more to come. All right, so let's get into these questions, which, by the way, I am keeping anonymous. So question 1, while reading your article, From Moving and Shaking to That Sabbatical Life, which, by the way, she is referencing, or he or she, I don't know if this is a she, he or she is referencing the article in my blog. You can find that in the show notes. All right, so back to the question. You mentioned that you worked at CAA Sports. What was your role at CAA and how was this similar or different to your role as Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships and Development at SC30? Alrighty, so I am going to answer this question in two parts. Bear with me as I recap my role at CAA, which I believe I might have touched on in previous episodes. So listener, if this is your question, I definitely encourage you to start at episode 1 of this season. But here's my quick recap. So at CAA, I was there for nearly 10 years and had various pivots. I talked about some of this in episode 3 of this season called No Pivots, No Growth. So take a listen to that episode too if you haven't already done so. So my role at CAA, which if you don't know, stands for Creative Artist Agency. My role was within the sports division. I worked specifically within the basketball department starting in 2013 with a role focused on client management and player marketing. Essentially, I was orchestrating the off-court brand activities and generating revenue for our NBA athlete clients. Upon my hire, the roster at that time included not only Dwayne Wade, but Tony Parker, Pau Gasol, Carmelo Anthony in his prime, Chris Paul, and an up-and-coming name, Paul George. Before the onset of my role at CAA, as you know, I was a part of D. Wade's management team independently before transferring into a role at CAA. My transition to CAA was seamless because my role didn't change coming from Wade's management team. So when I got the opportunity to join CAA, it was a growth opportunity, allowing the opportunity to work on Dwayne's off-court projects while also giving me the chance to work on projects for various clients across CAA's roster. So my main job was to manage Dwayne's brand partnerships and multi-year endorsements in a nutshell. I spent most of my day building marketing plans, supporting brand partners, and especially those brand partners that didn't necessarily have the budgets like a Gatorade or Pepperidge Farm at that time, right? Dwayne's portfolio had startup brands that were doing equity deals like Stance and Mission Athlete Care. And then this is what I call the et ceteras of the role. The et ceteras was a major part of the role and a major part of any role when you're servicing talent, athletes, entertainers, so forth. The et cetera can mean anything the client needs. So my days could go from managing brand partnership deliverables to helping to coordinate efforts around a fantasy basketball camp, which Dwayne ran for 3 years, to putting together a sponsorship strategy for a charity fashion show, to overseeing digital strategy for a social first docu-series, the whole nine. I never got bored with the D-Wade account. Towards the end of my tenure at CAA basketball, I had about 8 athletes I was either managing or co-managing at once. Circa 2017, I got involved in recruiting. I joined agents on trips to recruit college athletes before the NBA draft. This is pre-NIL. Very pre-NIL. Anyone who knows anything about the agency business, you know that player contracts is a significant revenue stream for the business. These clients of mine at the time included Jaren Jackson Jr., Kobe White, at one point Colin Sexton, and a few other guys. And in addition to a few rookies on my personal roster, I also had veteran players I was managing as well, in addition to my role on Dwayne's management team. This is also when I made the pivot from management to doing endorsement deals and player marketing. Because I was now working with a good chunk of clients, I took the liberty to pitch them to brands and companies that we were either not in business with yet or already in business with. I managed all of these roles and clients within the basketball division from 2013 to 2020. Oof, okay, that was CAA. Now let's cut to my role at SC30 Inc. Within SC30 Inc., I served as Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships and Development, which is essentially a marketing / brand strategy / development / partnership role. It was all encompassing. SC30 Inc., now 30 Inc., is a different kind of company from a CAA. So this role in a nutshell was to manage the brand and development efforts behind Steph Curry's intellectual properties, his programs, and his platforms within his private enterprise. What was unique about this role that differed from my time at CAA is that it was more about a focus on value creation of athlete-founded, which would be Steph, athlete-founded IP, rather than facilitating business with brands for player endorsements. It was a bottoms-up approach rather than top-down. At SC30, we were creating opportunities through IP that we shipped and sold to the market. Obviously, what was similar about both roles is that all of these efforts were tied to an NBA athlete. It was just a different model and focus. For instance, some responsibilities of my role at SC30 entailed putting a sponsorship strategy in place to drive additional revenue generation for Steph's youth amateur sport platform called Underrated, which by the time of my hire in 2022 was expanding from basketball into the terrain of golf. Underrated's mission was to provide amplification and support 3-star rated basketball athletes and junior golfers. But my role wasn't limited to Underrated's activities. Myself and others within the SC30 org, we also developed other intellectual concepts and platforms that played a similar role to Underrated in serving consumers in meaningful ways, while speaking to the passions of Steph Curry. So this was the difference between my role at SC30 versus CAA. It was really a focus around IP. So that answers that question. All right, let's go to the next question. You spent 9 years and 3 months at CAA. Was it hard to leave a company that you had such a long tenure with? Do you have any advice for how we can decide when it is time to move on from an organization? All right, so this question is about when it's time to move on from an organization. So, knowing when to move on from an organization is a personal decision and the personal career strategy that you set for yourself. But for the most part, it comes down to what I would say are the three key indicators: your growth, your values, and your fulfillment. All right, let's talk about growth. When it comes to growth, you have to ask yourself, are you still growing personally and professionally in your role? If you feel stagnant or as though you hit a ceiling, it might be time to consider new opportunities that challenge you and allow you to expand your skills. Number two, let's talk about the alignment of values. Over time, your personal values and the organization's priorities might change. So if you find yourself feeling disconnected from the mission, the culture, the leadership, that's a sign that the role might no longer be a fit for you, and you want to think about making a move. Number three is fulfillment. Do you still feel a sense of purpose and excitement about your work? If your role is constantly draining you or you're dreading to start the day, it might be a signal to explore environments that bring you more satisfaction. This is definitely a sign that a pivot is due. And finally, moving on, again, does not mean that you failed or the organization is wrong. It simply just means that your journey is taking you in a different direction, and hopefully a direction that will fulfill other personal career goals and objectives that you have. So those would be my three key indicators on whether or not to make a move. But it's important to check in with yourself and assess whether you staying in a job or organization is out of fear of change, financial insecurity, or loyalty guilt, which is a thing, right? Because it's generally where you might not want to be, but you feel this loyalty to stay. And also, before you make a move, I do have to say this: in the year of 2024, keep the market and timing in mind. Be smart with your pivot plans, please. Make sure that when you make your pivot, your moves make sense. And you can also always think about making lateral moves within your organization or the company you work for. That is always an option, so keep that in mind. Episode 3 on pivoting, by the way, is a good resource, and I share my personal experiences there, so do check that out. All right, and the last question here for this episode: how do you continue to show your true self and hold your values as you navigate through spaces that were not initially meant for you? What skills have you put in your pocket to navigate through these rooms? Okay, so this question was submitted anonymously, so I don't know the identifiers of the one who submitted this question. So when I hear the term, quote unquote, spaces that were not initially meant for you, I'm assuming you might be speaking on matters regarding gender, racial identity, or ethnicity, and in some cases, nationality. This can also be applicable to those who feel like they're in spaces that they're not qualified for too, right? So I can answer this keeping my experiences in mind as someone who is within the sports industry at large and identifies as a woman, a Black woman, American woman, and so forth. So first, I'd advise debunking the mindset of believing that spaces or opportunities are not meant for you. That is an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to stand on that. For those looking to break into the industry or get their foot in, you've got to believe that you have what it takes to make an impact and contribute, no matter what things look like, no matter how the room looks. My first advice would be to debunk the mindset. It's a different day and age in this industry, and you're coming in with innate understanding on things that this industry is in need of to continue to thrive and innovate for the future, especially in this age of digital innovation and tech and AI. Spaces are being redesigned for you. Trust me. Again, we are in the tech and innovation era of this industry. This industry is also now the most diverse it's been in decades. The sports industry has gone from being male dominated to almost split in terms of women's influence and leadership, which I have seen evolve over time. So, for young women looking to break in or pivot into the sports industry, keep this in mind. I say this even as the women's sports industry is getting record breaking traction and investment right now. The industry is also even more global than it's ever been before. Boardrooms are changing and evolving. There is room for you. The room is looking different. It is more and more meant for you to be there. But overall, navigating spaces that are not initially designed for you, regardless, requires a mix of three things: resilience, adaptability, and intentionality. Those are the three things that I would call out: resilience, adaptability, and intentionality. Over time, I learned that while a certain particular space or room or even opportunity may not have been created with me in mind, that does not mean that I don't belong there. So I'm going to share a few skills that I put in my pocket to help me navigate those rooms or opportunities. So this listener who submitted this question, have your pen and paper ready. So 4 skills. Number 1, self-awareness. Stay grounded in who you are, your values, your strengths, and the unique perspective that you bring. You have to know your why. Your why is going to give you confidence even when the environment feels unfamiliar or unwelcoming. Number 2 would be active listening. In spaces where I might be an outsider in any way, I listen deeply to understand the unspoken rules, the power dynamics, and the opportunities to make meaningful contributions. For instance, I have sat in boardrooms where I didn't speak the language of those conducting business, especially when going out to China for trips to orchestrate Dwayne Wade and Udonis Haslam's China tours, right? I've sat in rooms where Mandarin was the dominant language and I had to pick up on clues and unspoken rules to navigate conversation. Obviously, we did have translators, but there's something about practicing active listening that makes a big difference. Many of your endeavors might entail managing global business affairs for clients because, again, the sports business industry today is very global. So keep this in mind for even those situations as well. Next would be relationship building. Networking is key, so seek out allies and mentors within those spaces who can help guide you, amplify your voice, and open doors to new opportunities. And lastly, strategic excellence. Being excellent at what you do will speak louder than words. When you constantly deliver value, it becomes harder for anyone to question your right to be in the very room that might seem like it wasn't made for you. I hope that was helpful. All right, that concludes this career Q&A episode. Until next time, I am sincerely yours, Arlesha.